We are now recording, so want to welcome everyone. I am Coach Jeremy from World Changers, and we're here for the next 45 minutes, and we'll be going over some key stuff. Of course, I will open up to any questions that anyone has about anything. And if nobody has anything that they want to fire off at me, I'm just going to ramble about some of the things that I think are on the level of importance. But again, this is your Facebook Live, so please feel free to chime in and ask about anything or that's pertaining towards this exam, towards anything about the content, towards anything of specific. And of course, you can either unmute yourself or chat in that little chat box. And again, I'll just basically be monitoring that. So feel free to fire away with any questions. Again, this is Coach Jeremy from World Changers. And just so everyone knows that you'll get a recording of this, or this recording will be available following the end of the meeting, which will be about 6:45 Eastern time. Well, depending on what time you are, where you are in this world. But anyway, as far as this NCE, a few tidbitters to maybe kind of just pass along. And we'll have some, we'll have a guest speaker coming up in a little bit too to talk about some upcoming things. But also, one thing I want to just kind of point out that, while of course on this exam you're able to flag things and come back to the questions after if you need a minute to think about it. But I think most of the time when you leave a question and come back, you're more likely to change a question that you marked right to a wrong answer, because there was a reason that you thought about why you chose it at a certain time. And if you have no idea what it was, then I don't think having that would change anything. The only time I would think that would help, though, is if while you're taking your exam, if you run into a question that confirms or deny if the previous one was correct. So if that doesn't happen, I think you might want to leave it alone. And if you're not sure on any practice exam, give that a shot. Check that and see, because you'd be surprised how that oftentimes plays out. But a few things to kind of hit on that I feel like are important. And again, like I said, fire away with any questions, and I'm just going to keep going. And when I see questions come up, you either can voice them in the unmute yourself and ask them away, or you can ask them in the chat box. But a few things I want to kind of bring up, and again, this is all coming from the Hellwig book, so which you'll of course all get a copy of. But of course, um, I think when it comes to a few things that seem to get kind of lost, one domain that people kind of want to ignore because they think it's simple and simplistic and self-explanatory and general and obvious is ethics. And while that may be the case, I think with ethics, and I'm going to share a screen here so everyone will know what I'm talking about or can see what I'm talking about. But hang on a sec here. There we go. All right, so now people should be able to see. And I mentioned earlier how we have a special, we're going to bring in a special guest speaker. And let me just pull this up here. All right. Oh, and all right. And we got a few more people who are coming in. So, um, and Sierra has joined us. As I mentioned, we have a special guest speaker. So Sierra, do you want to jump in and say anything or fire away
Hi,
with?
Brianna. Hi, Claire. Hi, Emma. Hi, Annette. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for coming. As you all know, we do
Hello.
these Facebook Lives every month. Jeremy is our main star, and then sometimes we have people who come in. We've had Dr. Pam come, we've had Coach Lanika come, if you're unfamiliar, and I am here today. As Jeremy's probably already shared, this is just an open Q&A session, so you can ask questions about content, you can ask questions about upcoming services. This month, we do have a special conference happening. It's our first full virtual 1-day conference. And so if you have any questions about that, the reason why we're mentioning it is because you get to choose your own breakout sessions. So if there's any questions that you have here and you're also testing after September 20th, it's an opportunity for you to pick and choose all of the services that you want. If you've been a part of our services before, you don't get to choose the group that you can choose a group recording, but you don't get to choose the boot camp order. You don't get to choose the group. We have those scheduled out, but with this conference, you can choose your breakout session. So it's great to see you all. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but also answer any questions you all have. I saw Jeremy was sharing screen, so I'll let him continue, but great to see you all. Hi.
You too. Thank you, Sierra.
Thank
All right,
you.
and like I said, feel free to fire off with any questions, either in your mic, either in your chat box. I will keep monitoring that, but a few things that I'm just gonna piggyback on. And again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times people, like I say, they neglect ethics. But the problem is when you neglect ethics, we oftentimes might go with what our gut tells us or what the agency that we work with, they tell us, because that could be different than what the exam tells us. And, so keep that in mind. Of course, the duty to warn, the Tarasoff Act. If you've got a client who shows a threat, or intent to harm somebody, the first thing that you do is you intend the warn victim, and then you call the police, and you do it in that order. If you've got a client that tells you that they committed murder 5 years ago, I often hear, well, I don't have to report it. True, but what do you do? And that's you encourage them to go to the police. And also, as far as ethics, timing is important. What would you think about what they're asking and when they're asking it? What would you do first? So again, if somebody is potentially suicide risk assessment. Yes, you may get CPR. You may have to call EMS. You may have to get your supervisor, but what would you do first? And again, all depending on what options there are could dictate your answers, but sometimes if you miss those key words, it can make a question either more difficult or more simplistic. So I want to just kind of bring that up as always is a key thing when it comes to some of those practice exams. What's also key, and that's kind of what has been the heavy hitter of this exam, and this is the NCE and CPCE, and that is the helping relations section. That is not going anywhere. That is still consistent as far as one of the dominated areas, and one of the dominating parts of the helping relations section is this guy that you see right here, Rogers, person-centered, also known as client-centered. And, I always tell people also, because they're like, I can't remember all these people. And I always say, look at the name. Sometimes the name can help lead you to what it is. Person-centered, client-centered. The client is the center of this counseling process. This is a humanistic approach. This is not a come in for a subscription diagnosis, have a nice day. So if it's person-centered, you and we're going to figure this out together. As you see, this guy looks like kind of like a grandfather, sitting on a grandfather's lap, and he's got that cheerful smile that's, unconditional positive regard. Some key terms in this. Empathy. I get what you feel. I'm not going to cry with you because that's sympathy, but I get what you feel. Congruence. What I'm saying and doing is real, lining up. I'm not fake. I'm not putting on a facade. What you're seeing is what you're getting. Active listening. Aside from me hearing you, I'm paying attention to nonverbal cues. Are you looking at the ceiling when I'm talking to you? Are you shaking because you're nervous? All Rogers, all Rogerian, all person-centered, client-centered. Also, another big one, and maybe the biggest one, CBT. Because when you think about it, why is anyone in therapy to begin with? Because of how they're thinking. And another thing that I always hear people say is, well, who is the guy or guys or girls? Well, as you see here, and again, if you're just checking in, this is from the Hellwig book. We got a whole army of people that prescribe to CBT. And again, negative thinking, that stinking thinking, polarized thinking, mental filtering, overgeneralization, jumping to conclusion, to take catastrophizing, personalization, blaming, all seems like negative forms of thinking that we gotta work with and replace with more constructive and thought records, those type of ideas. So again, I always tell people also, on this exam, if you ever get a question and you have no idea what the answer is, you can't even limit to any of, you can't even knock out any elimination. This is not a bad option to go with, because again, why is anyone in therapy to begin with? Now, if the person is mentally ill, then that may not be the best option, because obviously there maybe their cognitive recognition might be off. But again, if it's an infant child, that also may not be a good option. But again, why are we all in therapy to begin with? Because of thinking, thoughts, emotions, behaviors. And one of these people in this army, Albert Ellis, I want to always like to jump from CBT to REBT. Similar. However, Sierra, are you raising your hand? Yeah. Did you want to jump in there? You're raising your hand.
Yeah, I want you to keep going, Jeremy. I
Yeah.
just want everyone to pay attention to what Jeremy's doing. Do you hear how he's not only thinking of the theorist, but thinking of something to remember the theorist by? A lot of times when people take the exam, they're expecting to be like, who is Albert Ellis? A very direct question, but it's not going to show up like that. Sometimes you might not see the theorist's name at all. The theorist's name is what you need to learn, and then the stinking thinking, right? All of these associations, these examples, that's what's going to show up in your tests. I just want to emphasize that when you're listening to Jeremy and you're taking notes, for those of you with your camera off, maybe you're a kinesthetic learner, don't just write down the person's name, but also pay attention to the examples that he's giving you to remember the people, because remember, it's a critical thinking exam. So don't just say, okay, Albert Ellis, Piaget, Freud, because that's not how they're going to show up. So Jeremy's doing a great job not only giving you the names of the people, but he's also giving you reminders or hints about why these people might show up on your exam. So as you all are taking notes or listening or rewatching the recording, I just want to make sure that you're catching his examples, because he's giving you them not just so you remember them, but because that's how they could show up on the exam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And also to that point of, this is always a question I get is, how do I know if I'm ready? How do I know if I'm ready? I always say, you could take practice exams, until, and you could all day long, but can you explain it to me? Can you teach it to me? That's kind of how I always, can you discuss it to me? Can you tell me the story like, you would be explaining to somebody else? That's kind of how I always look at this. And I mentioned CBT and I showed you that guy, Albert Ellis. Well, once you know that he now appears in REBT. And again, irrational thinking. But again, there's a few specifics in REBT that are only in REBT and not in CBT. The term crooked thinking. It might sound like it's stinking thinking, but if you see it, it's REBT and Albert Ellis. It's not anything else but that. It also follows a specific technique, which is the ABCDE approach. Again, only in REBT. So, this is basically, I kind of like to think of this as like a domino effect, where, when things kind of pile up in life, event, I have this belief that I tell myself something that's irrational. So I need to dispute that belief so I feel something different, flipping that domino, pushing it in a different direction. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas. Again, very easy to get confused, mainly because the same guy jumped over and now he's running his own way of therapy. But again, REBT, CBT, rational emotive therapy, Albert Ellis. Those are two. I always like to talk about these and right next to each other, because again, we go from talking about the person-centered therapy with Rogers to the ways that we negative forms of thinking and CBT and REBT. So those are a few things to be mindful of there. All right, another one that I like. Gestalt. So now we talked about a humanistic approach to therapy. We talked about thinking. This is an experimental type of therapy. And this is about the textbook terms, the here and now, and unfinished business. And so what does that mean exactly? It means that we're trying to focus on the present. And to do that, we got to deal with the past. And one of the ways that we do this is one of the most famous techniques. Does anyone want to either take a guess of what I'm talking about as technique in Gestalt? Does anyone have any idea or want to chat me or of what I'm talking about? No? All right. The empty chair
The
technique.
empty chair.
Yep, exactly. All right. Very good. Good job. Exactly. That's correct. The empty chair technique. And so, this could be obviously, I use this example. Let's say you have a client who is coming into your office because they had an argument with their significant other who got in her car, drove recklessly into a tree, and died. So that client is feeling remorse, guilt. He is a complete mess. So if I'm a Gestalt, this would be perfect if I'm a Gestalt to say, I want you to stand up, face that empty chair, pretend she's sitting in there, apologize, get off your chest, all this baggage up emotional destructiveness that's terrorizing you so that you can deal with it and then move on. Guilt, grief, anxiety. Obviously, you have to have some baggage to deal with at some point. So it's most likely going to be a client that's, got a few years on them, but that is Gestalt, Fritz Perls. So there we go. And again, feel free. If something doesn't make sense, please jump in. Or if you have an idea or a technique. Existential. Viktor Frankl. I always like to this is one where it kind of starts out in the understanding the origin of it. And basically, he was a prisoner in a concentration camp. And when you're when you're basically on the lowest form of humanity, the brink of death, what can I do I need a reason to live. He wrote a book called A Man's Search for Meaning. So even in the worst of terms, I can still see light at the end of the tunnel. I have reasons, something to live for, and I can be independent and responsible. And I like to think this is like Tony Robbins therapy. When if you go to a big seminar and you walk out and you feel like $1 million and you could take on the world. So somebody who is on the brink of death that seeking survival, somebody who is a successful person that can be a millionaire, and someone who's a millionaire that can be a billionaire. Sky's the limit, basically. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's also part of this. And basically being the best version of yourself may not reach that top level of the pyramid, but you're shooting for it. So there you go. There you go. Existential. May, Frankl, Yalom. Individual psychology. Adlerian. And again, going back to, well, what does it mean? I forgot. Well, the name, individual, the uniqueness of the individual, everything about them, their history, their short-term goals. Again, existential, we just went from long-term goals. This is short-term goals. And, from your spiritual aspect, your activities. And with this, one of the things that make this unique, birth order, where you were in the sibling pecking order, whether you were the oldest, the middle, or the youngest, or the only child, that has a factor on how things turn out with you, from your intelligence, maturity, IQ. And of course, if you're 7 or more years, you're considered an only child. So if you got 5 brothers and sisters, but you're all 7 years apart, you got 5 only children, according to Adler, according to this theory. And homework assignments. Now, again, I always caution people because certain techniques are spread across different types of therapies. So homework assignments can be used across other domains, but paradoxical intention, prescribing the opposite. If you've got somebody who has social anxiety because they bite their fingernails when they do a presentation, when's your next presentation? 2 o'clock Friday? Okay, 155, bite those fingernails. So again, I always think, the first thing when I think of Gestalt, I think of empty chair. Usually when I think of Adlerian, an individual, I think of birth order. So again, that is one of the concepts here. TA, transactional analysis. Eric Berney, he wrote a book called The Games People Play. I don't think you need to really know that in detail, but just he's a big guy, so it's not incredibly out of the question to think they might ask that, just like they would possibly a man's search for meaning like Frankel. But this is about communication patterns, life script. According to Eric Berney, we're a little bit better when we talk to people in our own wheelhouse, parents to parents, adults to adults, child to child. Those are called complementary transactions. When we go this way, when we go crossed, it's a cross transaction. Doesn't work out as well. Eric Berney.
I want to add here.
Yeah, please.
So for those of you who are working with teenagers, this can also explain why being a teenager is so hard, right? When we think of the PAC model, they're not a parent, they're not an adult, they're not a child. So when we talked about those cross transactions, right, or barriers in communication, this model is sometimes used in live practice to say, well, here's why it's so hard, because you're kind of in between an adult and a child. So anything you do is inherently going to be cross because it's not quite landing right. So I don't know if you all have used this model when talking to young adults before, but this is one of the models I've seen when just trying to help teenagers feel, adjusted, is that they use Eric Berney's PAC model to say you're not quite in these categories anymore, and so that's why it feels like no one understands you, you can't be understood, things are so strained.
Very good. Well said. So again, complementary, parents to parent, adults to adults, child to child. But when we go crossed, that is off the script, and when that happens, things usually, yeah, not good. Not good. All right. Okay, DBT. Marsha Linehan created this. And does anyone know what disorder was it created for? Anyone have an idea? Any takers? Can be used for multiple things, but there was no one. Okay.
Borderlands.
Absolutely. Well said. Yes, correct. Excellent. Borderline. Yes. It was created for borderline. Now, it can be used for others like eating disorders, certain mood disorders, but it was created for borderline. So, that probably should be a bell, red bells, whistles, sirens when on the exam. If you get something about a borderline client, I would be like, is DBT an option? Or if you get DBT, is borderline an option? So those are things that kind of go together. And again, because again, when you think about borderlines, it's maladaptive thinking and 4 techniques, which basically go perfect for a borderline client based on those symptoms. Mindfulness, being aware, being present, non-judgmental, emotional regulations, because again, they're all over the place. Interpersonal effectiveness, dealing with other people, and distress tolerance. 4 techniques. Another type of therapy that deals with techniques or more so questions is solution-focused brief therapy. Again, going back to what I was saying before about what is it, how do we remember it? Well, again, solution, brief, so it's short-term, 6 to 8 sessions, and solution. What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you in my office? What's the end-all, be-all goal? Or the most famous question, the miracle question. If I could wave my wand and free you of your anxiety, or the exception, what if you didn't have depression? Or the scaling. Okay, how bad are you? Scale 1 to 10. 8? What if we got down to 6? Again, time and a place for this one. If it's a sociopathic antisocial serial killer, we're probably gonna need more than 6 sessions. So again, but this is what it is, and it's 3 questions. So also, there's a time and a place for reality therapy. And again, the name, reality, I think of Get Real, and this is based on choice theory, taking responsibility, and it's not as much about what it is, but what it's not. And basically, we're staying in the present. We don't care about the past. We don't care about unconscious stuff. We don't even care about the symptoms. Basically, the fact that you're alive, you're in this office, you can change. Stop blaming others. Stop making excuses. Get out in this world and do something with your life, basically. Um, kind of like a cutthroat type of therapy, basically. Um, I think of somebody who might be just maybe diagnosed with laziness, or if they're a bad choice away from a relapse, we may not have time to talk about what got them here because their funeral could be before our next session. So, time and a place for this. But again, it's about taking action, responsibility, less talking, more doing, and being direct, not sugarcoating. Narrative therapy. The name, narrative. I think of the library. I think of books. That's what I think of when I think of the word narrative. And so if it's about stories and about therapy, what, typically are they going to be bringing to your office, the client? They're not going to bring you a happy story. They're going to bring you a sob story. And so as a narrative therapist, you're going to help the client reauthor their story. So let's say client comes in and has a problem because they're lonely. Let's say they were married and their wife or husband left them with the divorce papers. They've never been lonely before. They feel like this is so not their comfort zone. And if I'm the narrative counselor, I might say, how happy were you in this marriage to begin with? Not very happy. How much nagging did they do? A lot. Do you think that maybe that person did you a favor by actually leaving? Hmm. Oh, so again, you're not changing their life. You're not rewriting their history. You're helping them looking at it from a different perspective by asking questions, deconstructing it. And again, homework assignments, but again, not unlike the other types of therapy, narrative homework assignments. Write a list of pros and cons, write a letter, um, you know, basically from a narrative perspective. Psychoanalytic, psychodynamic, again, still up there, not maybe as well known as it has been in the past, but again, we're making the unconscious conscious, Sigmund Freud, and we have the id, ego, and superego, kind of like that bad devil and that good angel, and you as the, on the ego, try to basically in control of how things go. A lot of times with addiction, that's kind of how that's used also. And I think, I'm not sure it was Dr. Pam, but I'm hearing from some of the clients that I work with that there's this acronym for this psychosexual stages. I'm hearing a different acronym every time I meet with somebody. So oral, anal, phallic, latency, genital. Like I think it was like old ass people, something like that. I don't know but what the people are saying now, how you memorize it. But these are the psychosexual stages. And in the phallic, the power stage, there's a mother-son relationship, the Oedipus, and the father-daughter relationship, the Electra complex. And one thing that's definitely not going anywhere as far as Freud is concerned are the defense mechanisms. Now, I think the most famous one is the transference and countertransference because those apply in the ethics domain too. So that's probably the one that we got to know the most. Again, transference, what the client's feeling towards the counselor. So then counter is what the counselor's feeling towards the client. But then, and again, I always go back to the name. Look at the name. Denial, flat out refusal. I don't have a problem. A lot of times it's an addiction. I may be lying, but I'm consciously saying that. And then projection involves attributing your own unacceptable thoughts and feelings and motives to another person. So it's easier to hate someone to think that they hate me, putting my thoughts and feelings onto somebody else. Regression, acting or moving backwards in psychological time when faced with distress. So a 90-year-old might take off his shirt right on the beach like a 20-year-old. A 20-year-old might wear diapers like a 6-month-old, where you're going backwards in time. Displacement and sublimation. So displacement, satisfying an impulse with a substitute object, generally in a socially unacceptable way. Had a bad day at work, was verbally abused by my boss, so I go home and I take my cat and I launch it across into the fridge. If I act that way towards the boss, it's not going to go that well for me. Not quite the same with a cat. Sublimation, when you're acting and the substitute object is a socially acceptable way. Going to the gym, beating up a punching bag, or if any of you are Crime TV fans, Nancy Grace, she went to school to be a English teacher until her fiance was murdered. Then she flipped careers and went to law school to be a prosecuting attorney. And you see her channeling all that emotional turmoil to the greater good. And then, of course, these ones always kind of come up as far as the confusion: repression and suppression. Repression, pushing out memory awareness automatically and subconsciously, unlike suppression, where you're consciously pushing them out, almost like a denial. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to go there. I'm actually making the choice to break away, as opposed to if it's automatically almost like in a way of, I don't want to use the word spirited away, but just being taken adrift from it. And then, of course, reaction. This is one of my favorites: reaction formation. When you're displaying the opposite of how you feel, kind of like a third grade, crush. People, when you have a crush on somebody, you terrorize them. Or if you love them, or if you hate them, you're gonna shower them with flowers and chocolate, basically. So there you go. Those are a few. I think those are, so I would say, the heavy hitters, the big guys. I call them big guys. Obviously, are there little guys? Are there other people on this exam? Yes, there are. However, if you get a little guy question and you have them sandwiched against some of the big people, and you know who the big people are, then you'll know who they're not. So there you go. So those are, so before I jump off of the helping relations bridge, any questions while we're still here? Because I want to, okay.
I'm going to emphasize
Please,
what
please.
Coach Jeremy just said. Did you guys catch that? If you know who the people are, then you also know who they're not, which means you don't need to go into the exam knowing absolutely 100% everything about everything. If you still know these people like the back of your hand, when you read a question, and let's say we're talking, this is helping relationships, right? So let's say we're talking about Freud, and you know Freud, and you know his theories, and you know his attributes, then you know this is not Freud, right? So that's also the rule out method. So by virtue of still studying and knowing these people, you may not get a question about that person, but if they're in the answer choices and you still know about them, you know when to also rule them out. So that was a very important study technique that he was giving you there. If you know who these people are and you know these big names, you know when to identify them, but you also know to say, psh, I know Piaget, psh, I know so-and-so, I know that this is not that person in the question. And then instead of having 4 answer choices to choose from, maybe you've knocked it down to 2. So now it's a 50-50 shot, right? Which makes the question a lot less intimidating.
Excellent.
Thank you for providing your emails, everyone. Continue to do so, and I'll make sure you get the recording.
Yep. All right. Groups is also a big one. I always tell people when it comes to groups, the first thing that I tell them is we got to know our stages. We got to know our stages. And I always start with Tuckman. That seems to be the one that I think is one of the fan favorites. And again, to the point that I make about, oh, I can't remember, I forgot. Think about if somebody who's going to a group, what would typically happen? Forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. All right, coming to a group, you drive there, you park your car, you go inside, you pay the fee, informed consent, room 212 to the right, forming. Now, get to work. Now, keep in mind, there's a reason these people are in group to begin with. So to think that it's going to be all peace, sunshine, rainbows, and complete utopia, I don't think so. They're probably going to want to kill each other. And typically, when it storms outside, people don't associate that with, the greater good. It's usually, more like war. But in the second, then we shift because once we get into to the next stage, the norming, we start to see, wow, we're not as different as we thought we were. Universality, it's called. And I think of this is when you have two enemies that are at the bottom of a hill, and the only way they get up to the top is if they work together. So they say, look, let's just get up there, then we'll kill each other. And what happens on their way up? They actually become friends. So now that we know how to work together, we start achieving things, performing. And then once we start doing that, so long, bring on the next group, adjourning. So that is Tuckman. And again, understanding that is number one. And also, now that was Tuckman. There's another guy, his name is Corey. And unlike the theories where some of these have different names, they mean the same thing. So what Tuckman calls the storming stage, Corey calls the transition stage. And typically in life, when you go through a transition, it's kind of stressful. Hence, the name. Corey also calls what Tuckman calls the norming, he calls it the working stage. And then, of course, there's a few before and after stages that are involved too. The initial orientation stage, which is like, what are we going to do with these kids today? Obviously, before we start. And then the evaluation follow-up, survey, how did everything go? Was the group leader coherent? Was the topics relevant? Which obviously would have to be after everything's over. That is number one. And then, of course, these stages, understanding what goes on in them. So in other words, altruism, the concern that one group member has for another. Now, when would that happen? Well, keep in mind in the storming stage, let's say somebody is sick, doesn't show up. The thinking might be, you know what, I hope he never comes back. But now, in the norming stage, he hasn't been here in 3 weeks. I'm worried about him. So again, when things happen, some of them are in the name itself. Cohesiveness, that umbrella term where we're all buying in, attracted to and into this group and the concept of it. Again, developing socialization techniques. There's a reason that they're in group. Gaining information, interpersonal learning. Catharsis, you're releasing emotion. Again, the later stages of group, because in the early stages, it's resistance. I don't want to talk, none of your business. So what's the opposite of that if it's all coming out? And then, of course, those helping relations terms, they don't go anywhere. Existential, light at the end of the tunnel. And then, of course, while there's group member terms, there's group leader terms. Some of them are actually interchangeable. Again, the modeling, just like, empathizing, blocking, no, it's inappropriate. We don't do that here. Confronting, pointing out discrepancies. You say you want to stop drinking, yet you keep hanging out in bars where they serve alcohol. Active listening, again, helping relations term, that's Rogers. They don't go, they always appear and they always reappear. And then, of course, big group norms basically just means rules. That's all it means. And then, of course, types of groups. The biggest one, of course, I think, is understanding an open group versus a closed group. And closed group, we start with these 8 people on October 1st through December 31st. Once we start, we're locking the door. Nobody else is coming in. Ideally, we don't want them to leave, but we can't lock it from the outside or from the inside because it would, if they want to leave, we're not going to handcuff them to the chair, but we can control that we don't let anyone else in. And where the open group, once we start, they're coming and going every session, and the decision to shut it down is whenever we decide to shut it down. No specific end date. Again, scapegoating, that's another term. We're ganging up. It's his fault this is a disaster. Homo versus heterogeneous groups. I like this one as well because homo, we got groups of similarities, and hetero, we've got groups of differences. And this is a big thing when it comes to questions about groups. What are the positives versus the negatives? The overall broad concept of this is from a homo and hetero is, while if we're all alike, we may have more universality, we may get along better, but in the real world, it's not like that. So while this might be a benefit in the group, it might be a disadvantage outside of the group, where if we're heterogeneous, we might have some difficulties within, but it might actually help us out there. But of course, the big advantage versus disadvantages when it comes to groups overall, obviously the big advantage is the cost, the money, because obviously it doesn't cost as much to attend a group. And while it doesn't cost as much to attend, if we've got a bunch of them in one session, the counselor, the agency, they're making money off of it too. So it actually is beneficial economic both ways. However, where there are positives, there are also negatives. The biggest negative, obviously, confidentiality. Again, we're going to do informed consent, but again, that person in a group could go home and say to their significant other, "Would you believe what this guy said?" Ideally, you'd hope they wouldn't do that, but you can't control them. You're not going to follow them home at night. So that is something that, obviously is a disadvantage. And while it is frowned upon for them to associate with each other outside of groups, it's also something that you can't prevent, because what are they probably going to talk about out there? What goes on in here? And then there could be a division. But again, it is what it is. You can't stop that. And then, of course, but that is, of course, something to be said for groups. And then, of course, other things about, again, we got outcome versus process groups. Outcome, results oriented. Process, how we're using our time within the group. Primary, secondary, tertiary groups. P, prevent. We're preventing the problem. So bring in a speaker to talk about DUIs and substance abuse to second and third graders because they haven't done it yet. So we're going to try and scare and beat into their heads, convince them, don't ever try it, don't ever do it, because they've never done it before. Secondary, they've crossed the threshold, but we're trying to push them back on the straight and narrow before things get out of hand. So I think of this as 16-year-olds or high school students getting busted for smoking marijuana in a bathroom at a school dance. Assuming that they're not addicts, this is kind of where people start making bad choices. So let's give them something to think about so we can push them back on the straight and narrow. Because in a tertiary, now it's recovery. Now it's full relapse. The damage has been done, and it's basically that's what we're dealing with. So normally in the preventative, we have a younger group, more education based. And those are a few things to be aware of and mindful of when it comes to groups. And of course, just like in groups, and this is how I always kind of go back to when people talk about the overwhelmingness of information. When it comes to, there's person-centered groups, there's existential groups, there's Adlerian groups. But the only difference between that and when it appears in the Healthy Relations is it's in a group context. So if you're doing empty chair, Gestalt, it's in a group. That's the only difference. So when you see all this information reappear, It's the same information, it's just in a group context. Same thing with ethics. If somebody in a group threatens to kill somebody, you're doing duty to warn Tirasoff Act, whether it's in group. Now, usually that doesn't happen, but if it does, again, ethics apply as well. We screen for all group members. So even in an open group, there's a reason why so-and-so may not be a good fit in this group. If it's a group of all 14-year-old females, an 85-year-old might be turned away, for whatever reason. And yeah, but again, we got to understand groups. And again, going back, Jacob Marino, psychodrama. That's what it is. And when I think of drama, I think of plays. And when I think of plays, I think of casts and reenactments. Client has a problem. Counselor, every time I come home, my wife does this, my kid does this, my dog does this, and then the neighbor goes crazy and calls the police. Okay, you be his wife, you be his son, you be his daughter, you be the neighbor, you be the dog. I'm the director, ready, cut, just like if it were a play, reenactment, just like we have a full casting. And then again, so we got research groups we talked about. Again, there's Gestalt transactional analysis groups. Again, we're doing the thinking, the complementary transactions, REBT, all this information just kind of reappearing in a group context. All right. So there you go. So I think we hit on some areas. We talked about ethics. We talked about helping relations. A few more minutes. Any last, Cyril, I guess, do you want anything you want to add to anything that hasn't been said? You're muted, by the way. You want to unmute yourself? Yeah.
Well, yeah, sorry. I will speak for another 2 minutes, and I'll let you end it, Jeremy. I just want to remind everyone again that we do these every month. So you're more than welcome to come every month. We post a Zoom link. It's a very free open session. That way you guys can ask questions. You guys can get content. You guys can get to know Coach Jeremy. We offer special features, but also we are offering our first annual virtual conference. I do want to let you all know because we've never done it before. And if you purchase, you get a free group. So I'm not sure if any of you guys are interested in coming to group or if you've been to group, but you know that there's 6 to 8 with Dr. Pam. For the most part, we have other coaches who also teach that as well. Like we have other research and assessment specialists and things like that. I've listed the links in the group chat. I'm going to go ahead and post them again. Specifically tomorrow, we also have our NCE boot camp. If any of you are preparing for the NCE, we have an NCM HCE boot camp this month, as well as our conference this month. So if you guys are interested in any of those services, let us know. But again, we always offer these every month, the free content Facebook Live. So I just want to let you all know, if you have questions about those services, you can email us. You can reach out to Jeremy or I'll make sure to email you this recording. And if you go on our YouTube channel, we record and post every Facebook Live we've ever done. So that means there are several videos on our YouTube channel of content just like this, where Jeremy's teaching, someone's chiming in and giving this content as well. So I'm not just here to promote the services that we offer for payment. I'm also here to promote services that we offer free of charge. So you guys just have everything that you all are, like everything. I just want you to have access to everything. Okay, so I'm going to give it to Jeremy. I see, Brianna, you've unmuted. Yeah, all you.
Yes, I did have a question. Hello, my name is Brianna. I
Brianna, sorry, thank you.
no, it's okay. I was just saying, I'm so used to saying it out loud for at work. I took the NC back in 2020, and I want to start taking it again. I did you all's group sessions kind of like in and out throughout the years. So my question is, what do you think would be the best? How should I start? Should it be like a boot camp, or should I start with the group sessions for me trying to get back into it and take my tests?
Do you want to take this? Or
And I
do you
saw
want me to-
Jeremy, you were unmuted. Go ahead. I'll chime in if
Okay.
there's anything.
Well, I think you said 2020. I guess the question is, how much do you remember from 5 years ago? That's number one. I mean, the good thing is these people, they were all dead 5 years ago, so they haven't done anything different than they did 5 years ago.
Right.
I think that, and so the other question is, if you go through some of the practice exams, kind of how I guess that kind of can give you a little bit of an idea where you are from where you last picked up. I know that sometimes it takes a few reps to kind of, and then the information starts to kind of come back to you. So
Mhm.
everyone really, I don't think there's a blanketed answer. I feel like that, some people, it's easier to, either they're better off by themselves. Sometimes it's through an individual and sometimes it's through a group. So
Okay.
I know that just, obviously with the videos that are on YouTube, you can kind of see, okay, this works for me. I'm all about groups, or this is not working for me. And the good thing is there's so many resources that you can kind of, pick and choose and cherry pick. But yeah, so that's kind of what I would say. Sierra, do you want to add anything to that?
I
Okay.
would also echo, it depends on how overwhelmed you get, because some people use boot camp is recorded and comes with materials. So is group. Group is recorded and comes with materials. And group only covers one specific topic area. So if you get overwhelmed pretty easily, and just be honest, it's okay if you do, in the sense that
Mhm.
boot camp covers all the sections at once. So if you
Mhm.
leave and thinking, oh my gosh, I have to study so much, I've got all these things to do, then I think boot camp might psych you out. But if you can use boot camp as a gauge that this is going to quickly, because it's only 4 hours, it's going to quickly review all the sections. You can watch that recording as many, many, many times as you need. And if you are pretty self-sufficient, you can watch that boot camp and study that boot camp and get everything you need for the boot camp and the materials and the recording. And then from there say, oh, I actually want to attend this group. I'm going to buy this group recording. Or I think I definitely need individual sessions for ethics. Like that section I'm still not getting down. Some people choose to do the boot camp at the end where they've studied, they've had individual sessions, and then they're like, okay, I'm ready for one final review to send me into my test. So if you think that when you get a lot of information, you're like, you might psych yourself out, which some people do, I do not recommend starting off with the boot camp. If you think that you can
Mhm.
use it as a gauge and then you can watch that recording and use that, then I would do the boot camp over the group session. But group sessions, you don't get to pick the schedule, which is so you get a review, but you can also
Mhm.
buy a group session recording at any point in time if you want like a very specific video on a specific content area. So that's something also to consider, is the boot camp covers everything with materials. And then if you need something, you can come to individual sessions or purchase or come live to the group you need, because the schedule is available on our website. So you can see it ahead of time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Brianna.
Thank you.
I had a question to Sierra. If we did purchase the virtual conference, who do we email to let them know which group we want to attend?
Yeah, so if you want to come to the virtual conference, we will you can purchase on our website, but we'll automatically send you an email where you will fill out a form where you will tell us which group breakout sessions you want. So you can say for block 1, I want this. For block 2, I want this. For block 3, we have 3 options. Coach Jeremy is also going to do a live Q&A session. So block 3 is just going to be show up and you can do one of these again where you can ask all the specific questions you need about you or your test, or I've been studying groups and I still don't understand the difference between these group stages. So, and then we have block 4 and a closing session. We also are doing 2 free giveaways. So if you come, you also get in the lottery of 2 free giveaways for services. So when you purchase, you'll automatically get an email that gives you a form to let us know, and then you will 100% get the group you want. So we are seats are getting filled fast for the conference. I will completely say that, but we're still, as of right now, being able to guarantee the breakout session of your choice.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Anything else from either Sierra or myself?
Thank you, Coach Jeremy.
All right, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sierra. And thank you for everyone else for stopping by.
Thank you.
All right.
I will email this video out to you all, and make sure you go to our YouTube channel at Dr. Pam Turner. That we have so many free videos and so many other Facebook Lives there in addition to the ones that we offer every month. So you can just watch and rewatch and study and take notes. And of course, you can email us if you have any questions about anything. We'll answer. And we have a phone number as well, so you can call us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.